this for the people of Gaza, ajilan ghayra ajilan, in our lifetimes. We want to see that victory. We want to see a free Palestine. We want to see our brothers and sisters with the same dignity as the rest of the world. May Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala show us that day swiftly and quickly. Ameen. When Allah Azza wa Jalla knows best.
Takbir!
Thank you so much for that very extensive answer, and I think it covered a lot of important bases. I just want to kind of sum up very briefly just a few things. So, you know, one of the issues that what he mentioned in the beginning regarding allegiance and where do we hold our allegiance, right? And that's been one of the primary attacks that people have had on Muslim lawmakers, is that, well, they're going to have their allegiance to the Sharia and they're going to have their allegiance to this foreign state. When in reality, the irony is that they have allegiance to this country and everyone else has allegiance to Israel. And so it's not our allegiance that should be called into question. Our allegiance is known. It's everyone else's allegiance that we need to be calling them out on. And so we should never allow that to even be an issue for us as Americans who are participating in the civic system. And, you know, in the post 9/11 era, we had a lot of like, you know, condemn this, condemn that. I'm American, I'm wearing a flag, hijab, et cetera, et cetera. And we've come past that point. We don't need to apologize for who we are. We don't need to apologize for our positions. We don't need to apologize for our identity, right? And a lot of the idea that, oh, Islam radicalizes you, well, depends on what your term of radical is, right? Because we talk about radical politics and liberation. Yes, Islam is radical in that way because Islam seeks to uproot the social order, right? The oppression, the diseases of the society that were mentioned by Sheikh Yasser. And so in that way, yes, radical is not this negative term in the way that it's applied to us. Right? And so, yes, we want to be radical. We want to be revolutionary in the way that we approach what our society is going through. And so we want to have this sense of identity where, yes, we are American, we contribute to the society, but at the same time, we don't have to prove it to anyone. We don't have to be performative in it. Right? We have to challenge, we have to work, and we have to make sure that our stances are known and that we're firm on those stances. And so that being said, I just want to ask Tariq really quickly to give us a few action items that we can give to our audience moving forward from this session.
Okay, I just really briefly, because I know we're way out of time here, go to our C4 website, ajpaction.org, and we've done a lot of position papers and a lot of action items that you can utilize with the phone numbers and contact information where you can call the White House, demand a ceasefire. Trust me, when there's a plethora of phone calls that you make to your members of Congress and to the White House, flooding them with a lot of phone calls and emails can really have a positive impact. So know your congressperson. So there's a website on there for you to help you out as well, so you can navigate and find your local congressperson, and make sure you find people within your district and just essentially flood their offices, and also raise awareness. So as A&P, we do a lot of educational work. There's a host of organizations that do a lot of educational work. So raise awareness about the issue and what is actually taking place on the ground and how you can educate the American public. There's a lot of polling data that shows that the more education, the more Americans learn about what Israel is actually doing on the ground, the less they like it. This is proven by polling data. So raising awareness, political advocacy, do your own teach-ins, do your own events, get a group of people. MashaAllah, this is a wonderful community here in Dallas. I'm sure there's a lot of other wonderful communities. Get together, put events together, cultural events, whatever it is. Keep the spirit of the Palestinian people alive, and trust me, change will come, inshallah.
It's going to be a speech right after this. The hero. Heroes are going to come.
Okay, so then there's another one.
Yes, inshallah. Yes, inshallah. Okay, so I'll give a takbir. Takbir! And maybe a quick chant because we're about to get some honoraries for some heroes, inshallah. The chant is faith over fear. Faith over fear. Faith over fear. Free Palestine until Palestine's free. So with that being said, our next session is going to be a very, very heartwarming session of the program. There's so many definitions of heroes, and there's so many definitions of courage. But if you were to ask me what's the definition of courage, it's one thing: doing something. Courage, in simple words, is doing what knowing that you're afraid, but you do it anyways. So people think heroes, especially the young, they think it's Spider-Man and Batman and all these Marvels. And I'm not endorsing any of those Marvels, but we have to bring it to reality. We have heroes that are over across the seas, and we have heroes here with us that we need to start knowing and paying attention to so we can aspire to be inspired. And one of the heroes are like the Mu'taz Azaza in Gaza. How many of you guys know Mu'taz? MashaAllah. He's very well known. About 20 million in the world know Mu'taz. But how many of you guys know the Mu'taz Azaza of Dallas? There you go. There's a few that know them. There's a few who are actually using their cameras that are helping us win the narrative war that we're actually winning. They're the ones who are documenting what's happening with all our efforts. The second ones who we really want to start acknowledging and are considered heroes are the students who've been on the front lines. They've been students on the encampments, putting their career at the risk, putting everything at the risk. They still didn't even go to see their future, and they're putting it at a risk for who? For the cause and for Gaza and for Palestine. So those students will and should continue to be acknowledged and called as heroes for other students to look up to them and do what they need to do. Lastly, the physicians. We have doctors among us, and they're very humble doctors, by the way. They went on humanitarian missions on saving lives. And we know in Islam, whoever saves one life is like you've saved the entire life, humanity. So with that being said, we have a few of our heroes that we'd like to bring up to the stage. And again, the idea is to inspire our youth and let them know that this is a form of heroism that we should aspire for. So without further ado, if we could, inshallah, turn on the music or the Mawtini, and we'll have our journalists, our students come towards the stage, inshallah. If I can ask the doctors and humanitarian to step up to the stage. The doctors, please come to the stage.
Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. The term jihad is a Quranic term. We should not be ashamed to use it in its appropriate methodology. There is something called legitimate struggle. Yes, there's something that some people do that is wrong, terrorism. We're not talking about that. But when you have a group of doctors, a group of journalists, a group of civilians give up their safety, leave their practices, walk in to a war zone in order to treat patients, in order to save lives, when they do so at great cost to themselves, when they do so without knowing if they're going to come back to their families or not, when they do so without any worldly benefit, without any salary, actually they're giving up their salaries, then wallahi, this is jihad. This is jihad. This is jihad.
Takbir!
And it's people like these who continue to inspire us. There's ways we can benefit the ummah, every single one of us. And these are examples for those ways. There are people who have talents, resources that the ummah needs. And when you contribute those resources at great cost to yourself, that is exactly the essence of struggling in the way of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So I want to make special dua for all of these brothers and sisters and all of those that are from across the country that have sacrificed so much for the sake of benefiting our brothers and sisters in Gaza. May Allah bless you. May Allah protect you. May Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala continue to utilize you. Takbir!
Allahu Akbar!
Takbir!
Allahu Akbar!
Takbir!
Allahu Akbar!
On all of our behalfs, Jazakumullahu khairan. May Allah Azza wa Jal bless all of you on all of our behalfs, and may Allah continue to inspire you and use you in those ways. Wassalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.
Mic test. I just want to say something. That we are journalists here locally, but the true journalists are the war journalists in Gaza. Shireen Abu Akleh, Motas, Hind Kudari, Palestia Al-Akkad, Abdul Hadi Habib, Samir Abdulqa, Bisan, Auda, Mustafa Bakir, Dua Sharaf, Mohammed Muin Ash, Salam Mema, Imad Al-Widi, Aya Qadura, Waliyal Dawda, Majad Arandas, La Tahir Al-Hassanat, Rashid Siraj. I can go on and on the list, but they are the true war journalists and heroes. We are inspired by them. Thank you.
Free, free Palestine! Free, 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 free Palestine! From the river to the sea, Palestine will be free. Inshallah ta'ala. So, with no further ado, we'll be calling up our next speaker for the session. It's going to be Sister Diana Uthman on the role of media in shaping the Palestinian narrative during the war on Gaza. Do you need a hand with that?
They're showing up.
Can you start without the slides?
Yeah, I could start. I mean, if they can't do it, it's fine. I'll just go from the computer. I need the computer. They have this. Oh, I guess they have it out there. Assalamu alaikum. So I'm back after a very short break. So I'm going to be talking a little bit about the role of media and shaping the narrative when it comes to Palestine and Gaza specifically. Okay, so the slides are up there. Okay, good. Who's controlling them? Oh, okay. Okay, so you can go next. So I just wanted to go through a few terms related to the occupation. You can go to the next slide. Next. So these are some terms that we should be familiar with in reading the news and doing analysis when it comes to what's happening in Gaza right now. These are terms that everyone is familiar with, but sometimes we don't distinguish in terms of the meaning, right, of the specific terminology. And I know there have been other sessions where some of the speakers have gone over these, but I just wanted to kind of highlight them as far as things that we all need to be understanding of. So the distinction of Israel as a settler colonial state or a colonial state, which is something that they are pushing back against in their rhetoric, as I mentioned in the previous session. And we talked about apartheid and what that means and what that looks like on the ground. Occupation and siege are obviously two terms that we use frequently. The occupation refers to the military occupation, right, on all of the land of Palestine, and the siege specifically refers to the limitation of movement and entrance and exit of people, goods, etc., in and out of Gaza through land, sea, and air. Another few terms that are also crucial for us in terms of our understanding, and I'm sorry, I'm going quickly because time is very limited. Anti-Semitism, Zionism, and Judaism, because there is the term anti-Semitism is thrown around quite a lot now as far as any sort of indication of support for Palestine, using the phrase from the river to the sea. Even saying free Palestine has been recorded as an anti-Semitic incident by the ADL. And so we see a lot of news reports about the rise in anti-Semitic hate crimes or the rise in anti-Semitism across America, or specifically in college campuses. And we know that these statistics are very inflated because they are including these shows of support for the Palestinian people. And so we need to distinguish these incidents from actual anti-Semitism, which is a form of racism, right? Racism and hatred for Jewish people just because of their religion or ethnicity, which is not what Palestinians stand for, right? Palestinians stand for equal rights and justice for all people, regardless of nationality or religion. So we make this distinction between Zionism, which is that political ideology, and Judaism as a faith, right? And the conflation of the two is what leads people down this dangerous path of being labeled as anti-Semitic. We talked in the previous session about genocide and what that means, and what are the different manifestations of genocide and how do we get to that point. Ethnic cleansing specifically refers to the movement of people out of a particular land or territory to quote unquote cleanse it, right, from people of that background or that ethnicity. And so that's kind of an important distinction between those terms. You can go to the next two. Fast forward. Next. Okay, so media literacy is a very important concept that we are generally lacking, right, as a society, not just in relation to the Palestinian issue, but in relation to pretty much any issue that is talked about in the mainstream, right? Because of the influx of so many points of view, so many accounts on social media that often spread misinformation and disinformation, we have to be very wary about where we get our information from and where we take our news from. Right? And so media literacy means that you are a critical consumer of media, that you don't just see any link that somebody forwards you and take it at face value or think that it's accurate or believe anything that it says, even if it's allegedly quoting somebody or something, or placing a picture, for example, with a quote, or giving you statistics, right? You have to be able to trace where these things come from and what their sourcing is. Next slide. So these are some questions that we want to ask ourselves when we are critical consumers of media, right? So one is, what is the source? Where is this coming from? Is it from the Israeli military? Is it from the Israeli government? Is it from a journalist who's embedded in a military unit? Right? These are important questions to ask to understand who is providing us with this information. So from that, we can tell, is it credible? Is it reliable? Is this source even an authority on that topic? Who is this person who is giving me this information, right? What are their credentials? And I'll talk about an example of how this can go very wrong in terms of coverage when it comes to Gaza. Obviously, many of the sources that are portrayed in mainstream media come from a very biased perspective and are generally lacking Palestinian voices, right? And so this is what we have been trying to combat during the last 7 months, is amplifying Palestinian voices, amplifying the voices of people on the ground, not necessarily just taking, the reporters who are not necessarily connected to the situation and taking their word for it, right? We want to have the eyes and ears of the people who are experiencing this genocide firsthand. You can skip to the next, yeah. So an important concept that I think we should all, especially as Muslims, be familiar with is Orientalism. And why is this important? So Orientalism is a term that Professor Edward Said had coined, and it's related to the way that the West views the East, quote unquote, the East, right? The lens through which the West views the East. And so this lens is what impacts all of the different portrayals that we have of various countries in the United States, in academia, in Hollywood, in pop culture, and in news media, right? This affects all of those different territories. Why? Because those different biases are what come through when it comes to that particular lens of Orientalism. So if you think about this on an everyday level, right? The terminology that we see used when it comes to Muslims or Palestinians, the portrayals of Muslims in popular films that you see, as terrorists, as hijackers, as spies, as whatever you have it, right? All of these things are impacted by that view of Orientalist thought. And it's not just in pop culture, it's through academic writing, through even interpretations of the law. It has so many different facets to it. You can skip to the next slide. Next. So those were just quotes from Edward Said's book. So we need to challenge, right, these frameworks through which these stories are told. Right? Because that is the root of the misrepresentation of the Palestinian narrative. So what is the framework? What is the paradigm that we are using to understand what is happening in Gaza? And the problem with a lot of the coverage in the United States is that it begins with October 7th, right? Free the hostages, those types of narratives. It does not include the context of the decades of occupation, right? The context of a crippling siege, the context of colonialism and apartheid, right? And so those are the important elements that are missing from this narrative. You can go to the next slide. So some problematic terms, next. So there are a lot of binaries that media likes to use when it comes to coverage of Palestine. And these are just some of the most frequently seen ones, right? And so we know binaries are oppositions, right? Trying to really portray things as just black or white, right? And so we have this myth of the barbarian, right, versus the civilized, or that they are engaged in this fight on both sides as if they are both on equal footing. Or you have the use of passive language, so Palestinians just die versus being killed or murdered or starved. You have this idea that Eastern cultures, Arabs, Desis, people from all these different backgrounds are irrational and emotional, right? Versus Western cultures, which are logical and rational. One that Prime Minister Netanyahu used himself was this contrast between light and darkness. And he says that in a tweet that this is a fight between the children of light and the children of darkness. Obviously using that binary of good versus evil, and obviously portraying the Palestinians as just innately evil. And finally, boiling this down to just a conflict or clash versus this being a occupation, a settler colonial project, and a genocide. Because a conflict or a clash means it's just kind of a fight, right, between these two sides. And it's not drawing up a clear line between the aggressor and the person who is being oppressed. Next slide. And so some of these things were kind of touched on a little bit in the previous session, but seeing Israel as this, quote unquote, only democracy in the Middle East versus seeing Palestinians and Muslims in general, even those in America, as militant or radical, even when they're acting in self-defense. And so anything that Israel does is seen as defense, and we often hear the phrase that Israel has the right to defend itself, when we know in reality it's the opposite, that the occupied have the right to defend themselves against an occupier. And when Palestinians defend themselves, it is called terrorism. Right, and that's one of the problematic terms. Even the entire framing of the coverage of what is happening is being called the Israel-Hamas war, right? And this in and of itself is problematic because, first of all, you're implying this myth of balance, that it is a fight between, again, two equal parties who have equal access to resources, to weapons, to funds, right? And that's obviously not the case. But you're also implying that this is just a war against Hamas, that this is not a war against Palestinians, when we know that this is a war against all Palestinians, right? This is definitely a myth. And so all of this is used to justify the murder of civilians, right? To completely obliterate infrastructure. So we've seen the complete destruction of hospitals, the complete destruction of universities, right? All of these things deliberately targeted. And why? Why is this justified in some twisted manner? Because, quote unquote, they use human shields, right? Because they are hiding in civilian areas, because they have tunnels under their hospitals. And then we saw all of these false narratives, right, that were perpetuated regarding sexual violence, regarding the beheaded babies, all of these things that were debunked, right, completely. Next slide. So this otherization, right, it leads to the demonization of Palestinians, right, and the demonization of Muslims as well. And that translates into destructive foreign policy, right? That translates into billions of dollars for weaponry, right? And why? Because we no longer see people as human beings, right? We see them as these people that are dehumanized, that are there just for us to control, for us to dominate, for us to quell, right? And so we as the Palestinians somehow are not equipped to tell our own stories because we can't be objective. Our stories are only valid if you hear them from a white person. Then they're objective, right? So this is one of the biggest things that we're fighting against in terms of the narratives that are being perpetuated. Next slide. So I had some examples in here. There was an interview with Mustafa Barghouti where the interviewer basically uses these stereotypes about Palestinian men and Muslim men not being able to talk to women against him in his interview. And when he's logically defending himself and providing arguments for everything that he's saying and facts, instead of going against his logic, which she obviously can't because the logic is sound, she attacks him saying, oh, you probably never, you're not used to hearing women talk, right? And so that's the way that she tries to kind of make him be quiet, but obviously that does not work. There's another example of an interview with Hussam Zumlat where he's constantly asked to condemn, do you condemn, do you condemn, right? And he kind of subverts the question saying, well, that's not the question that you need to be asking me right now because that's irrelevant. It doesn't matter. Next slide. Next. And so we really need to look closely at the language that the things that we read and that we watch use and how that language can perpetuate these subconscious biases. Next slide. So this is an example of a story that the New York Times ran, and it was about the weaponization of sexual violence by Hamas. And all of the sourcing was completely debunked when it came to this story. And the New York Times did not even retract it, even though it was debunked. And there was a lot of information that came out afterwards regarding the author and how she had never even written a piece like this in the past and how she had been embedded with the Israeli military. And there were so many facts that basically proved that she could not have unbiasedly written this piece, and yet it was allowed to run, it was allowed to be published, and it was not retracted. You can go to the next slide. Next. And so these are just some of the elements, right, that came out afterwards regarding her piece and regarding why the different things that she wrote in it could not be trusted. And so the irony is that when it comes to the Palestinian voices who are talking about these instances of abuse and murder and starvation and maiming and all of these different things, when they have evidence, they have video, they have audio, they have every single thing under the sun to prove that it has happened, that's still not taken into account. Next slide. Next. So this is a quote regarding oppressive language. And it's a quote by Toni Morrison that I often refer to because it really speaks to how impactful language is in our popular discourse and how it affects that we understand pretty much any issue. And so she says, oppressive language does more than represent violence, it is violence. Does more than represent the limits of knowledge, it limits knowledge, right? And so when you don't have the proper terminology and the proper framework to understand a story, you only understand it in the way that it's told to you, and you no longer challenge it, right? And so that's what we are trying to do through our voices, is challenge these narratives. Next slide. Next. So these are some examples of headlines that use these tactics to basically undermine the credibility of Palestinian sources, that sensationalize the headlines, that cause a presumption of guilt when it comes to Palestinians versus Israel. They call into question any sort of statistic excuse me, that is provided by Palestinian sources, yet when the same statistics come from an Israeli source, then somehow they are able to be trusted. Next slide. These are some other examples. I know I'm running out of time, but there's the last one I want to kind of talk about is this piece that ran in the New York Times by Hala Alian, who's a Palestinian psychologist and poet and author. And so she wrote a very moving piece about why Palestinians have to audition for empathy, right? And that was initially the title of this op-ed, Why Must Palestinians Audition for Your Empathy? So it's a very impactful, very hard-hitting headline that really kind of hits at your gut. You know what it's going to be about, right? When you read that headline. And the headline later was changed to the Palestine double standard. And this one really caught my attention because I had read the article initially with the first headline. And I was like, wow, that's an amazing headline. That's a great piece. It was so emotional. It was so raw. It was so impactful for anyone to connect to really understand how Palestinians have been forced to sort of beg the world to care about them being massacred. And what that feels like for somebody living in America, where when their country is supplying the weaponry to do this, right? And so I shared this article with my class, and as we were reading it, when we refreshed the page, suddenly the article's title changed. And suddenly certain words were removed from the piece. And I had never seen that happen before in real time, where I was reading something and I refreshed it and it totally changed. And so why is this the case? There's nothing wrong with the original headline. There was nothing wrong with the original language, but perhaps it was too humanizing. Perhaps it was too impactful. And so when you look at the second one, you don't necessarily even know what it's going to be about. The Palestine double standard. It can really be about anything, and it can really be from either perspective. It's not very specific, right? And so the choice to edit that was very deliberate. So I know I'm out of time. There's so much to share on this topic, but the thing I want to leave you with is when you are reading things, when you are watching things, don't just get upset or angry or, say things that scream at your TV or at your computer, at your phone. Be a proactive consumer of news and information. So when something is incorrect or you see it misrepresenting your perspective, write to the paper, write to the author, send an email, send a tweet, make a phone call to the newsroom. Let your perspective be known, because the other perspective is definitely having their voice heard. And I know when this first began, in the very beginning, we were getting called for a lot of interviews in Chicago, especially for people who are Palestinian, who have family in Gaza. And the first few times I was on NPR, and I have a friend who works in the station in Chicago, she told me, when you and a few other people got on and you were talking, we immediately started getting phone calls complaining. Like, while you were still on the air, we were getting phone calls. And did I say anything wrong? No, I was just talking about my personal experience. And the other person who was speaking was a physician talking about his experience. But they didn't like what we were sharing. And so there were complaints. And so it's very important, if you like something, let that be known. Call and say, hey, thank you for having this Palestinian perspective, whether it's on your local news, whether it's on a website, whether it's on somebody's Instagram page for your local news outlet, maybe make that comment, because the other comments are definitely coming in. And just be aware of what you're reading, who you're quoting, what you're sharing with people, because one of the most harmful things when it comes to our credibility is when we share things that are later debunked or seen to come from a not so veritable source. And that can become a problem, especially in the age of like WhatsApp forwards and, people texting to groups massively and sending things out without even giving them a second thought and just assuming that they're true. And so that's what it means to be media literate, is to not do things like that without first investigating, without being critical and thinking about the things that you're sharing with others, whether it's on your personal platforms or just among the people that you know. So that's pretty much it, because I'm very much so out of time. So thank you very much. And inshallah, I don't know where the, oh, there you are. Okay.
So give it one more time for Sister Diana. It is a fact that the curtains have been showed and we are winning the narrative war. If we weren't, TikTok would have been banned. And that's just one reason we're doing something right. So up next will be our next performer, is a Palestinian Arab American comedian, speaker, writer, academic, and adjacent professor at University of Detroit Mercy School of Law. He holds a master's in Middle Eastern and North African Studies and a JD Law degree, both from the University of Michigan in Ann Arbor. He writes and speaks widely on political and social affairs and has appeared on radio and television, including Fox News, CNN, MSNBC, ABC, and more. He draws on his experiences growing up as a child of Palestinian refugees, performing and lecturing on topics like politics, society, culture, identity, Palestine, Islam, and more. Please welcome Amir Zahar.
Thank you. Thank you, Omar. Assalamu alaikum. Assalamu alaikum. Okay, take me off of the screen. Put my picture back up on the screen, okay? I want people to look at me, not at the screen. Take my picture off. Take my picture off. Good, thank you very much. Okay, let's try this again. Assalamu alaikum. Masa al-khair. I'm so happy to be with all of you here in Dallas. And we are here today to celebrate Palestine and the strength of the Palestinian people. We got to bring up the energy a little bit, because let me be clear, we are winning. We are winning, and we are going to be all, I promise you, we are all going to be in a free Gaza very soon, all of us on the beaches of Gaza having dinner together. I promise you. I promise you we will all be there. Now, let me understand who's here. If you're Arab, clap your hands, all the Arabs that are here. Okay, good, good, good. And among the Arabs, I know I'm going to miss a lot of people. So do we have Syrians? Okay, Jordanians, Egyptian, Iraqi, Yemeni. No Yemeni, okay. Lebanese, welcome. Okay, good. How about the rest of North Africa? Tunisia, Algeria, Morocco. Wonderful. Sudan, Somalia. Anyone from there? Okay, how about anyone here from Saudi Arabia? Okay, let's talk about them for, no, just kidding. No, they own the building. We're gonna be nice. Okay, good. Any Palestinians here by chance? Any of those? Wonderful. It's my people. And I know I missed some people. I know we have people from India and Pakistan and Bangladesh, all of our brothers and sisters from South Asia who have been standing strong with us. Yes. And then, I don't know, did I see any just regular white people? Just regular white people. There's one there. None on this side. Only on this side. When we marry white people, it only goes one way. Yes. I am Arab and I am Palestinian, and I'm not ashamed to say it. We have had to protect it for the last 8 months, but I'm not ashamed to say that the Arab culture is the most beautiful culture on planet Earth. We have an amazing culture. There are other cultures that are as beautiful as ours, but please take me off the screen. Please take me off the screen. I'll wait. Please don't put me on the screen. And as I live in Dearborn, Michigan, I'll wait. It's not that hard. You did it like it only took a second ago. There you go. Thank you. Please don't put me on the screen. And I come to you, all of you here today from Dearborn, Michigan. I don't know if you've heard of Dearborn, Michigan. It is the Arab Disneyland. It's where we have everything. In fact, we just elected 2 years ago our first Arab mayor in Dearborn, Michigan, our first Arab Muslim mayor. Yes, yes, he's made a lot of changes. Some of them people understand, some of them people don't understand. Like the city council meeting used to start at 7:30 on Tuesday. Now it starts 7:30, 7:45, 8 o'clock, maybe Wednesday. Ramadan is now 2 months in the city of Dearborn. We're very proud of who we are. And we have the culture there, and we have the most beautiful culture. Arabs, we have a beautiful culture. For those of you who don't speak, I don't know if please grab your screaming kids, okay? Just take them on the, yeah. Don't they know we can hit their kids? We're Arabs, we can just grab your screaming kids. In Arabic, when we see white people, what's your name, white lady? Hanan? They gave you one of our names? And you changed your name too? Oh, like Cassius Clay, Muhammad Ali. What was your Cassius Clay name? Tina? Tina Louise. Tina. Hanan. It's a beautiful name. Beautiful name. Hanan. Sometimes we Arabs, we have a word that we use for white people. When they live in our countries, we call them ajanib, right? That means foreigner, ajanib. And then we move to America, and do you know what we call white people? Ajanib. We still call them ajanib. We came here, and we call them ajanib, okay? There's like a 75-year-old Palestinian woman. She's walking around the mall in Texas. She's like, what's all the ajanib? I'm like, you are in Texas. Of course there's ajanib. We have a beautiful culture, and we love our culture sometimes too much. But I am Palestinian. I always tell white people that I am Palestinian like Jesus, because they need to know that he was one of us. He was one of us, right? Right? Yes. We need to use this a lot more. He's one of us. He's the most famous man in the history of the world, and he's one of us. And his mother is the most famous woman in the history of the world, and she's one of us too. And they are both Palestinian. We have to take this back. I know white people think Jesus was from Frisco or Murphy. He's not. He's one of us. He's Palestinian, okay? He's one of us. And I have to explain this to people all the time. And I grew up around all white people. I live in Dearborn, Michigan now, but I grew up around all white people. Everybody was white where I grew up. Everybody was Hanan where I grew up, okay? I was the darkest person in my school. It was very, very white. And I always knew that I was different. My dad spoke funny. We smelled like garlic. We ate leaves from the backyard. Hello, sir. But I never really knew, is this guy gonna keep walking in front of me? Is he with you guys? Not CIA, FBI? Okay. By the way, I welcomed a lot of people here, but I forgot to welcome one important group of people since we are here at the ICNA Dallas conference. We should also welcome all of our invited and uninvited guests that are here with us from the FBI and the CIA. Let's have a big hand for them. They are here. I don't know where they are, but they're here. They're watching. We have nothing to hide. And I grew up with all white people. I always knew that I'm different. Also, I'm Palestinian. For those of you who don't know, we Palestinians, we grow up a little bit differently than everybody else. We grow up from a young age to be professional protesters. I remember I grew up in Philadelphia. I'd wake up at 7 a.m. on a Saturday morning, and by 10 a.m., we were in New York City, and we were protesting. And we Palestinians, we march and we protest, and we don't care if it rhymes or it doesn't rhyme. We don't care. 1, 2, 3, 4, we don't want your war. 5, 6, 7, 8. Free Palestine. We don't care. It doesn't have to rhyme. And I always knew that I was different. I never knew how different I was till when I was a little kid. My best friend who lived across the street was this little white kid named Tommy. We hung out with each other all the time. Of course, Tommy's mom was white. My mom was Arab. His mom was different than my mom. His mom let him do stuff that my mom never let us do. I don't know what's wrong with Arab moms. They hate sleepover. See all the kids having trauma? They hate sleep. My mom never let me sleep over. Mom, can I sleep over Tommy's house? What is wrong with our house? Sleep here. Jeep Tommy, all your friends, and come and sleep here. And I always knew that I was different. I never knew how different I was till one year it was Christmas time, and Tommy's mom took me and Tommy to the mall to go see Santa Claus. And we waited in line for an hour, and finally it was our turn. And then Santa Claus said to Tommy, "What do you want for Christmas, little boy?" And Tommy said, "Let me have a bike." And Santa said, "Okay." And then it was my turn. And that's when I realized I was very different. Because I sat on Santa Claus's lap, and Santa said to me, "What do you want for Christmas, little boy?" And I looked at him with my little Palestinian eyes, and I said, enforcement of UN Resolution 194, allowing us to return. We just have different dreams. But we are all going to go back one day, I promise you. We are winning and we are going to win. And the Israelis don't understand us. They have never understood us. They are victims of something called projection. They say when we say from the river to the sea, Palestine will be free. They say when we say it is genocidal. Now, when we say Palestine will be free, we mean for everybody. But they think when we say it is genocidal, because when they say it, it is genocidal. See, that's called projection. They never understood us ever. They make us feel bad about being from other places. Palestine has been a destination for 3,000 years. That's why we look like everything. That's why we have names from all over the world. It's a beautiful place. Remember, God chose Palestine. He didn't choose a people. He chose a land. He chose a land. And we are lucky enough to be from that land. All I know is that when you go to Palestine, you never ask anybody for directions because everything in the whole country is dughri, everything's straight. I didn't know that till I went there. I was in Jerusalem. I said, how do I get to the theater? They said, dughri, dughri. I said, how about the hotel? They said, no problem, dughri, dughri. This is why the Israelis can find us all the time, no matter where we are. We don't know how to tell people how to escape. Go run, dughri, and they find them. We have this beautiful thing. And I live now trying to explain Palestine to people all the time. I've been doing shows around the world. I just came back. I did a show in Dubai where we had 1,300 people talking about Palestine in the Dubai Opera House. And then I went to Bahrain. And then I went to Kuwait. And then I went to Jordan. And then I went to spend a few days in Palestine. And the people there are so strong. And they see and appreciate everything we are doing here. And they say, keep going. We see you on the campuses. We see you in the streets. And so whatever you think you're doing, the day that you get tired of being in the streets and talk about Palestine, I want you to remember that there are Palestinians in Gaza and Ramallah and Jerusalem watching you. And they see what you're doing. And that should be your inspiration every day. That's why we're going to win, because the Israelis don't understand us. I was sitting with a guy in Ramallah. I said to him, tell me about your education, because, you know, we Palestinians, I don't know if you know this, we are overachievers. My dad was born in 1948 in Yafa. When he was 1 month old, he was ethnically cleansed from his homeland. He ended up in Jordan. He went to a UNRWA school, those blue schools where all the terrorists come from. That's where my dad went. And eventually he got a PhD in America. He went to college and then he went to master's degree and he got a PhD. And now my Palestinian refugee dad has 41 patents from the United States government. See, this is who we are. This is who Palestinians are. But I don't think anybody understands how difficult it is to be the son of this overachieving refugee. I remember when I was a kid, I brought my test home from school. I said, Baba, here's my test. I got a 96. Where is the other 4? I said, oh man, can't deal with this guy. And I was in Palestine. And I was talking to a friend of mine in Ramallah a few weeks ago. And he reminded me, he says, Amir, you know, I have a PhD in science from London. I said, wow, that's amazing. I'm proud of you. I said to him, what do you do here in Palestine? He said, I have a coffee shop in Ramallah. I said, man, you have a PhD in computer science. You could do anything. You could live anywhere. You could make a lot of money. He said, Amir, I will stay here and fight against occupation for my freedom. I said, okay, all right. First of all, I said, calm down. I'm not the enemy. And I said, and what will you do when you get your freedom? He said, when I get my freedom, I will leave. So if the Israelis want us to leave, it's very simple. You give us our freedom and we might leave. But as long as we are not free, we are staying in our land and we are not going anywhere. We're not going anywhere. When I entered this time, I talked to the soldier and he said to me, you know, they ask us, what is your fazagh name? What is your fazagh name? What is your mazagh name? As if this is secret information to us, you know. An Arab, when he introduces himself, he tells you 5 generations of his family. This is not secret information to us. And then he said to me, what is the purpose of your visit? I said, I'm going home to Palestine What is the purpose of your visit? Then he put me back in the VIP room for like another 5 hours. We get treated very special when we visit our homeland. And I have to urge everybody to go to Palestine. I know some people say, I don't want to go to Palestine. I'm worried how the Israelis will treat me. If I told you that the Israelis would hold you for 12 hours, but they would eventually let you in, would you go? Of course you would. So the Israelis should never be a reason that we don't visit our homeland. They should never be a reason that we don't visit our beautiful sites in Jerusalem and all around Palestine. So all of us have to go and support the people. And we have to go with these beautiful traditions that we have. You know, I wrote a book called Being Palestinian Makes Me Smile. I'm getting ready to go. This thing says 2 minutes and 35 seconds, so I'm getting ready to go. I'm leaving. For those of you who don't know, when Arabs say they're leaving, it means like another 35 or 45 minutes. I'll explain to you in a second. But I wrote a book called Being Palestinian Makes Me Smile. If anyone wants to support me and buy this book, I'll be outside afterwards because I'm a Palestinian comedian and I talk about Palestine. So they're never going to put me on TV in America or give me a Netflix special. And it costs $20. Please, to the men here, don't bargain with me when we go outside, okay? Don't say to me, so how much did it cost you to print the book? Just shut up and give me $20 and we can all move on with our lives. Buy 2, buy 3. And we have this culture. Hanan, I know that you've married one of us, I assume. Did you marry one of us? Yes. I know that you now understand our culture, but let me explain to you a couple things about our culture. I'm going to tell you 2 things. One of them is a saying, and another thing is a part of our culture called start leaving. Okay, let me explain it to you. The first one is a saying. It says, Ahlan wa sahlan. I'm sure you've heard it before. In fact, let's all say it to Hanan. 1, 2, 3. Ahlan wa sahlan means ahlan, you're one of us. Sahlan, we want to make it's like saying hello, welcome. And let's all say it to her again. 1, 2, 3. Ahlan wa. In fact, for the first 3 hours that somebody comes to my dad's house, he only says, Ahlan wa sahlan. You have a beautiful house. Ahlan wa sahlan. The food was delicious. Ahlan wa sahlan. Your kids are so smart. Ahlan wa sahlan. And then there comes a time around 10:30, 11 o'clock, where all the men are sitting in the salon. Do you have this room in your house, the salon? This is the room that no one is allowed to go into ever. It has all the pictures from Palestine. It's covered in plastic all the time. You have that room in your house, right? And all the men are sitting there, and it's getting late. They already did everything. They had coffee, they had tea, they had balawa, they had bizr. Somebody talked about the Palestinians and the Jews. It's getting late. And nobody is saying anything anymore. And my dad leans back and he leans forward and he says to all the men, Ahlan wa sahlan. Now this Ahlan wa sahlan does not mean welcome to my house. This means you got to go. And the Arab guy standing next to my dad, he understands what's going on. So he stands up, he looks at my dad and he says, you know, Abu Amr, it's getting late. We should go. And my dad lies to him. No, stay, sleep over, sit down. This is a lie. This is the only time we lie. And see, he understands what, by the way, you can't do this with white people. One day my dad invited the white neighbor over the house and it was getting late. He looked up my dad, you know, it's getting late, we should go. And my dad said, no, stay. And the white guy said, yeah, okay, fine, you're also. 10 minutes later, he's like, I really got to go. He said, no, sit down. I said, finally, my dad freaked out. Get the hell out of my house. Don't you understand in our culture, when we say stay, it means go. And then this guy, he understood what was going on, this Arab guy, and he calls his wife in the room. He says, Rania, let's start leaving. Because you can't just leave in our culture, right? It's rude. They sit back down, they go through some more stuff. The little kid gets sent into the room. Baba, mama says she's ready to go. Tell her like another 5 minutes. He's like the UN ambassador, back and forth. And finally they leave. Start leaving. You got it, Hanan? Start leaving. This is why there is still Palestinians in Palestine today. Because 75 years ago, the Israelis came and said, we are the Israelis and you have to go. And the Palestinians said, okay, let me start leaving. Let me say bye to everybody. It takes a while. And so the last thing I want to say is we Palestinians and we Arabs and we as the Muslim community, we have one thing with us that they can never take away from us. And that is the truth. The power of the truth is what is finally winning. This moment since October 8th, it really is the culmination of decades of training ourselves for this moment. Because we listened to our grandmothers. Because I listened to my grandmother when she told me in 1948, they told us we could come back in 2 weeks. And we are still waiting. And I listened to that. And so we were ready for this time. So understand what the power of the truth that all of you share. The power of the truth means they can never shut us up. They can try everything, but they never will. The power of the truth is they're scared of one woman in Congress named Rashida. Out of 535, this one woman scares them to death. If you are strong and secure and you believe in yourself, you don't care about only one woman out of 535. You only care about her if you are weak and fragile and insecure. And so before I leave, I know we all love each other and I know we support each other, but I'm afraid that we don't tell each other enough. And we need to tell each other, especially in these times. So I want you to look at the person on your right and look at the person on your left and tell them, I'm happy to see you today. Now I want you to look at these people and tell them in a very loud voice, I'm proud of you. And now I want you to look at these people and tell them in a loud voice, I love you. Tell them again, I love you. Bil halal. One more time, I love you. We have to stand up because the biggest lie they tell about us is that we are a people full of hate. Only the opposite is true. We are a people full of love. And love will be what wins this, and love will be what makes Palestine free one day. Thank you so much. Ahlan wa sahlan. I'll be outside and I'll see you all soon. Ahlan wa sahlan. Thanks. Am I giving this to you? Yes. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Brother Amir, for such a wonderful program. And this brings us to the last session of this wonderful day. Before that, I want to thank everybody for your patience. And I pray to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala sincerely that every one of you, when you stand in front of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, He counts this day, the whole day, in your good deeds. And you get the full reward, inshallah. So as we look back throughout the day when we started with reflections. We started with the knowledge sharing. We started with telling each other that what we have learned as a doctor, as a student, as somebody who was just a journalist there, we shared the experience with each other. We told each other that how do we want to move from here? We have protests, we had prayers, we had plans, but now what? What is the action? What I can do for this ummah? And I look back and I think through the surah, different stories that are mentioned in different chapters of Quran. I look at the story of Nuh alayhi salam, and when I see myself as a part of his ark that is sailing through the sea, I question myself that am I going to make it to the next phase of this story, next stage of the story? Would I be able to see the shore on the other side of the sea or not? When I look at myself as a part of the story of Yusuf alayhi salam, I look at this child who is being abducted very early in his lifetime, very immature in his lifetime. When I am a part of this story, I start having doubts. But when in these two stories and many like those, when I look back and when I am being told this story, I feel relieved. Because I know that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has a plan. Because I know Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala will not leave me alone. When I know that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is the best of the planner. So when I know the end of the story, my worries go away. When I know what is going to happen in the end, my worries go away, because Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is the best planner. So my brothers and sisters, as I look at the story of our ummah, as I look at the story of Palestine, when I'm a part of this story, I get worried. I become worried that maybe the target is not few people. Maybe the target is to eliminate the whole people from Gaza. But when I look back, and I tell you this because I trust firmly in Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala being the planner, that He has the plan, that these 40,000 lives will not go to vain. These 40,000 martyrs will not only be remembered as somebody who gave their life for the ummah, but somebody who is enjoying the reward in Jannah as we speak, inshallah. So we have, inshallah, 3 speakers, and the first of them is our brother Ghassan Hito. Then I will call, inshallah, upon Brother Mohsen Ansari, and the last but not least will be our Dr. Yasir Qadi. So I will invite first Brother Ghassan Hito, who is the co-founder, board member, and CEO of Syrian Forum. He has spearheaded education and community empowerment initiatives across the United States. He left Dallas in 2012 to co-found the Syrian Forum in Turkey to support and rebuild Syrian lives, and also provide management consultation to international companies. Brother Ghassan Hito.
Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. It has to be louder. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. Speaking on Syria, I will not take away from anything that has been said today. I am Brother Ghassan Hito, and I lived in Dallas for a long, long time. Some of you know me as working at Brighter Horizons Academy as its chairman and president and various positions. And also I was a co-founder of Muslim Legal Funds, and I've done other crazy things in Dallas. So alhamdulillah, I wish that you've been making dua for me since I have decided to go focus on Syria. It's very difficult for me to speak after we heard to Sheikh Yasser, and then Miss Uthman, and then our dear brother Amir, mashallah. So competing with that is very difficult. But I want to share with you some thoughts that will show you great similarities between what's happening in Palestine today and what has been happening in Syria since 2012, 2011 at least. And I'll share with you statistics. From these statistics, more than likely, what you will see that oppression, anywhere you see oppressions, the methodology is the same. So take, for example, I'm going to share with you statistics on Syria. Half of the Syrian population have been displaced. That's about 24 million people back in 2010. Today, the population is less than 13 million. 7 million of those have been displaced internally. Various cities in Syria, mostly from the south to the north, and the other 6 or so have become refugees in other countries like Turkey, like Egypt, like Lebanon, like Jordan, and Europe, and some in the United States. So that's one statistic. Listen to the next one. In Syria, so when we talk about displacement, we relate to what's happening in Gaza, correct? With the Gaza situation today, Syria remains to be the second largest refugee crisis in the world. By the way, if I asked you when was the last time you heard something on the news on Syria, what would you guess? The last time you saw something on CNN or Fox or anywhere? 4 years ago. I would tell you, probably the last time you've heard Syria in a repetitive fashion, so to speak, was 2018. Since then, there has been no news. If it wasn't for the earthquake that hit southern Turkey and northern Syria, northwest Syria, but last February 6th, Syria came back to the news for a few days and then it disappeared again. And yet, Syria is one of the worst humanitarian crises in the world. And the reason I'm saying this, so we can draw similarities. I'm going to reach you to a conclusion. So we don't lose sight of what's happening to the Ummah. Keep that in mind. Listen to this statistics. Today, as we speak, in northwest Syria, 2 million people, today as we speak, they live in makeshift camps. This is today. They don't tell you that in the news. Listen to the third statistics. 90% of the Syrian people live below the poverty line. This is today. So if you hear someone tell you, well, I know a friend who went to Damascus and things are okay. He's telling you about the 10%. Make no mistake about it. This is not up for discussion. It's a fact. Why they don't share it with us, they don't share it with you, that's a different story altogether. Because they don't want to tell you that there is a huge crisis over there, that you should pay some attention to it. And this is why probably they came up with a law in Israel to prevent Al Jazeera from reporting. You see? So if they have a choice today in Gaza, they will prevent all from reporting. By the way, my son Ubaida, some of you know him when he was a little boy. He is a correspondent for TRT World for the last 8 years. Alhamdulillah, if you were one of his teachers, you'll be proud of him. Thank you. He reported recently at The Hague for the International Criminal Court. You know, let's have a big hands for South Africa for raising the case. Yeah. Thank you. Today he was supposed to be in Jerusalem to continue his reporting on Gaza, but he was denied access in Tel Aviv. So inshallah, he'll get another chance to report. So the whole idea is they don't want you to know. They don't want you to know that half of the population have been displaced. They want you to focus on, well, let's figure out a way to normalize with Assad again, who had killed over 1 million people and who had displaced half of his population, who had caused 90% of his people to live poverty line, who causes 2 million people to continue to live in camps. And guess what? 2.5 million school-aged children, they don't go to school in Syria. Do you know what that means? If you tie all these statistics together, you're talking about poverty and you're talking about no education. And I want the expert of experts to tell me, when you have poverty and you have no education, what do you come up with? Be aware, my brothers and sisters, be aware what's happening to the Ummah. 2.5 million school-aged children, they don't go to school. If I take you in a tour, and I frequent Syria a lot, if I take you from the city of Jarablus to the northwest corner of Afrin, and if I take you to Salqin, to Harim, to Jandaris, to Idlib, if I take you through all of these cities, and if we go to the farmers market, and we go to all these places where they fix cars and motors, and all of that, and we talk to boys that are aged 11 and 12. Why 11 and 12? Because these kids were born after 2011 and all what they know is living in camps. Chances are, listen to this, we will rarely find a child who knows how to read and write in that age. Do you know what that means? 3-4 years from now, when we talk about Syria, we're going to talk about cholera-like pandemic, COVID-like pandemic, just because of that generation that was systematically raised to be unplugged from basic necessities, not only food and drinks, and they don't have the basic education that they need so they can live the life that they expect and they deserve. My dear brothers and sisters, when I stand in front of you talking about Syria, is not to take away from the issue of Palestine. The issue of Palestine, Gaza, and our heart, no matter what happens, we have this button called Palestine. That's here, that's here, that's here, that's here. It's all over us. No matter what we work on, when something happened to Palestine, we know our compass and we know how to adjust. But at the same time, we have to think of the Ummah. Just like we see in front of us on TV, systematically, towns after towns, street after street in Gaza are being leveled. The same thing happened in Aleppo. The same thing happened in other cities in Syria. What does that tell you? What does that tell you? When Assad was told to what end, he said, we're okay if we get Syria back when we first came into power, 7.5 million people. They're okay with that. And I'll finish with this statistics and I'll let you draw your own conclusion. The issue of Gaza started October 7th, right? In 2023, and we consider the time is relative calm in Syria. Do you know statistically the number of bombings that took place in northwest Syria? Listen to this so I can finish because the time went up, I think, about a minute ago. In 2023 alone, 1,223 bombings took place in northwest Syria, where those camps are. Listen to this and I'll conclude. 43 of those bombings that basically by Russia and Iran on northwest Syria took place since October, November, December. So 40% of 1,223 bombs and shellings that took place in 2023 happens during the time when the Gaza situation was happening. And you draw your own conclusion. I ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to free Palestine, free Gaza. We will never, ever apologize for our dreams. We dream of a free Palestine. We dream of a free Gaza. We dream, Gaza and Palestine is the same, so. And we dream of free Syria. We will never apologize for our dreams. And this is something that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala ordered us to do. وَقُلِ اعْمَلُوا. Just do. And Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, inshallah, will be our aid and the aid of those who are fighting for their basic freedoms and for basic needs. I ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to help them, be with them, give them the patience and the perseverance, and guide us all to figure out ways to support them effectively. May Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala bless you all. It's good to be speaking to a Dallas audience again. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.
Thank you so much. Jazakallah khair, Brother Ghassanito, who was comparing the similarities between the situation in Syria and Gaza. Next, inshallah, second last speaker today, Dr. Mohsin Ansari, who is currently serving his second term as the Amir or the President of the Islamic Circles of North America. He was elected as the President in January 2021. He's a pediatrician by profession. He's also an author of multiple research papers published both in national and international medical journals. He lives in Maryland with his wife and 5 sons. Brother Mohsin Ansari.
Auzu billahi minash shaitanir rajeem. Bismillahir rahmanir rahim. My dear brothers and sisters, just 1 week back, this time Sunday, exactly at this time, In Baltimore, Maryland, ICNA organized ICNA's National Convention. And with a crowd of 30,000 Muslims who came and attended that session just 1 week back, ICNA recognized the services of two main people and groups who supported Gaza and Gaza's effort. I'll start with that. Let's just recognize them here one more time before we can move on, because we owe them. Number one, when the whole world was quiet, when we all felt frustrated, when we all felt weak, when we all felt that nobody in the world can say a word of justice, the land of Nelson Mandela rose up, stood up, and filed a complaint. Let's give a round of applause, a similar award to South Africa. Second, there was history which was in the making in last few weeks in the campuses and universities of America. We all witnessed courage, resilience, braveness at its peak. ICNA recognized the Columbia University and Yale University students. Let's give them a round of applause. And you know what? When those people were awarded on the stage and 30,000 Muslims sitting, they all stood up and they recorded a video. That video was sent to the brothers and sisters in Gaza. And I want you, although we are less in number here, to replicate, record this video here so that we can send it to brothers and sisters in Gaza, and they will see the response of the Dallas Muslim community. This will be sent to them. Let's see it. I will say the slogan and you will raise your hand so it can be recorded and sent back to Gaza, inshallah. Takbir! You are sending it to Gaza, brothers. Remember that. Inshallah, this will go. It went last week. Takbir! Free, free! Raise your hands so it can be shown to them, inshallah. Free, free! Free, free! Free, free! My brothers and sisters, ICNA, your organization, the day when this crisis started, I want to tell you, we sat together with the whole Muslim leadership in this country. And I want to remind you, the crisis of Gaza is a remnant of something which happened in the history 4,000 years back. When a 16-year-old young man took the hammer in his hand and challenged the power brokers of the world and kept on breaking every single idol which came in front of him. This was the story of Gaza. It started there when Hazrat Ibrahim ﷺ took the hammer and did that. And the story continues of Gaza, when 7 young men, whom Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala mentioned in Surah Kahf, decided they will revolt with the tyrants of that country, and they went into the cave. And the story of Gaza continued when two of the bravest and the most pious people born on the face of the earth were alone in a cave, and the people around them were ready to kill them. And one of them was saying to his companion, La tahzan, inna Allah ma'ana. Don't worry, don't be scared, because Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is with us. The story of Gaza started from there. And today when we see the images of a father holding his young baby who is dead and saying that I thank Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. When we see a surgeon father in emergency room dissecting the whole leg of his own son without anesthesia and with tears in his eyes in Gaza hospital saying, Subhanallah wa bihamdihi Subhanallah al-Azim. My dear brothers and sisters, Gaza has shook the whole world. Gaza has shook the whole world. Millions and millions across the world told the story of Gaza, which world has never seen. Never in the history, never ever in the history, people have watched a genocide, brutality, barbarism live with their own eyes. But never in the history, people have come out on the streets of Paris, London, European countries, America, Washington, D.C. in this number, never in the history. And what American brothers and sisters did was also amazing. Many of us sometimes feel dejected, sometimes feel tired, sometimes feel exhausted. My brothers and sisters, no. After this crisis, American Muslim community was a different Muslim community than 9/11. After 9/11, I am witness of that, and many of you were also. Muslims in America were scared. They were worried. They were concerned. They were thinking about their future. They were scared to wear hijab. They were scared to go to their mosque after 9/11. But do you remember what happened after 7th of October? This was a different American Muslim community. We stood up. We raised our voice. We gathered in 400,000 in Washington, D.C. in front of White House. Our imams, our leaders, our organizations, every one of them stood up for what? For the thing which we trust, which Prophet ﷺ says, La tahzan inna Allah ma'ana, that we think the promise of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, liyutfi'u nur Allahi bi'afwahihim, wallahu mutimmu nurihi, kafirun. That these people, they try to extinguish the nur, the power of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala with their feeble blows. But they don't know that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has decided that His light will prevail. And we know in Quran, innaka la tukhliful miyad, that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala definitely fulfills His promises. And then the world saw, which no one has ever witnessed, the braveness, the courage, the resilience of our students all across the country. You know, as of today I got the report. There are more than 3,000 students who just graduated from Yale, Harvard, UCLA, Berkeley. Their degrees have been held. Their degrees have been held because they raised the voice for Palestine. I met all those young girls and boys just last week. We recognized them. We supported them. ICNA teams were there every city to help them. But all this sacrifice, all this braveness is for what? Because we trust innaka la tukhliful miyad. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has promised victory. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has promised, هو الذي أرسل رسوله بالهدى ودين الحق ليظهره على الدين كله ولو كره المشركون. That Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has decided the deen of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, which Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam brought, will prevail. And this is what these young men and women has done in our campuses with the confidence, إِنَّ الَّذِينَ قَالُوا رَبُّنَا اللَّهُ ثُمَّ اسْتَقَامُوا, that they have said what is right and they have stood firm for it. So this is the time for American Muslim community to remember, do not get tired out. Do not get frustrated. Do not think it is not working. Trust me, it is working. It is working more than ever. The streets of London, just 3 days back, who would have imagined the whole ever in the world? Netanyahu gave a speech on the TV, live TV in France, 3 days back. You might have seen the images. The whole Paris came on the streets in millions to refute his speech. Whenever in the world we have expected that. ICNA's Why Islam site is flooded with the request of Quran. You must have all witnessed. This Ramadan was a special Ramadan. How many people accepted Islam? Unprecedented numbers. Not only in USA, throughout the world. This is a barakah of the sacrifices of our brothers and sisters in Gaza. Before I go, my brothers and sisters, a message for you. We are gloomy. We are sad. We are upset. We are very frustrated with the loss of the lives in Gaza. But remember, as a Muslim, we have this iman that the time of the death and the place of the death is decided by Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. They were supposed to leave this world at the same time, at the same place. But is there a better way to enter the valley of death? Is there any better way to enter the valley of death than the door of martyrdom? The door of martyrdom. Welcome them to the enter of to the valley of death. My brothers and sisters, continue your struggle. Continue supporting our students. Continue supporting our organizations. Continue to raise your voices. Do not lose the hope. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala will inshallah make this happen and we will see free Palestine. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.
Jazakallah khair, Dr. Mohsin Ansari. And inshallah next, I have Dr. Yasir Qazi. His two titles, he is the Dean of Islamic Seminary of America. Mashallah, he is a resident scholar at our own Masjid Epic. But very few people know, mashallah, he is a product of two proud parents who have been an activist for their life, for decades. Mashallah, his father, Dr. Mazhar Qazi, is the one who started Islamic Circle of North America chapter in Houston. So if you want to have, inshallah, one Yasir Qazi in your family, be at the forefront of the struggle. Dr. Yasir Qazi.
Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. In one of the most difficult and traumatic times of the seerah, when the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam was fleeing from Mecca to Medina, and he had no army, he had no groups on this earth to protect him. You all know the story in the Ghar of Thawr, where even Abu Bakr as-Siddiq was trembling. What are we going to do? And the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam exuded that confidence. Ya Abu Bakr, what do you think of two that Allah is the third of us? What do you think is going to happen? And as they are traveling from Mecca to Medina, Suraqa ibn Malik sees an opportunity to get 100 camels. the bounty. And he races his camel to try to capture, to try to bring them back so that he can become wealthy. And Abu Bakr as-Siddiq looks behind and he sees Suraqa, and he tells the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam, Ya Rasulullah, Suraqa is going to come, he's going to capture us. And once again, the calmness, the dignity, the confidence of our Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam. Allah will protect us. And as you know, 3 times Suraqa attempted, and 3 times Allah miraculously stopped his camel from processing until Suraqa fell. He rode the camel again, tried again, fell. And the 3rd time he realized that Allah is protecting him. So he shouted out to the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam, Al-Aman, peace, I promise you, I just want to talk. I'm not going to do any harm. So Abu Bakr looked at the Prophet, should I try to protect you? And the Prophet said, no, let him come. So now Suraqa came on his camel in front of the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam. Suraqa had the camel, Suraqa had the weapons, Suraqa had the bow and arrow, and he's coming submissive. And before he can say anything, the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam looked at him. And where was he? In the middle of the desert. Where was any power? Where was any wealth? He's fleeing for his life. And what does he say to Suraqa? Oh Suraqa, a day will come when the bangles of the Caesar, of the Kisra, when the bangles of the emperor of the Sassanid Empire will adorn your hands. Out of nowhere, this prediction. And even Suraqa was flabbergasted. The bangles of Kisra will be on my hands? And the Prophet said, yes, that's going to happen. One of the constant themes of the seerah, exuding confidence in spite of your situation, knowing that tomorrow there will be victory, even though the circumstances don't show any victory. How can you possibly predict? How can you possibly exude that level of confidence when you have no army, no weapons, no mass democracy, nothing is there? And he's telling Suraqa, you're going to be wearing the bangles of Kisra. And as you all know, barely 15 years after this incident, barely 15 years, and Umar ibn al-Khattab radiyallahu anhu, when Kisra's empire falls and all of the treasures come, and it's literally in the masjid of the Prophet, literally gold and silver, all of this there, and in the top of that pile, Umar picks up the bangles of Kisra. He picks up that famous icon that was the bangles of Kisra. And he knew exactly what the Prophet had predicted. So he said, Aina Suraqa? Where is Suraqa? And Suraqa was called, Umar is calling you. So he was rushed to the masjid and he said to Suraqa, go sit in the front. I have to fulfill the promise of the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam. And in front of everybody, he then put on those bangles on the hands of Suraqa. We learn from the seerah constantly, over and over again, that the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam, in the most negative of times, he would exude confidence amongst the Sahaba. When Khabbab ibn al-Arat came to the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam, and do you know who Khabbab was? Khabbab was a slave whose master and owner would take burning coals and put it on his back. Khabbab's whole body was covered in bruises, in burnt marks. And when Khabbab came as a slave in Mecca, and he came to the Prophet ﷺ, and he said, Ya Rasulullah, for how long will this go on? Ila mata? For how long will we be persecuted? For how long will we be punished? For how long is all of this going to come? And the Prophet ﷺ was sitting with his back to the Kaaba. He leaned forward and he said, Ya Khabbab, are you in doubt as to this matter? Are you in doubt that Allah will take care of us? Do you have any shak about this religion? فَوَاللَّهِ, a time will come when a lady will travel from Sana'a to Hadramaut. He's in Mecca. Sana'a and Hadramaut are the furthest cities in Yemen. 2 further regions out there. A lady will travel without any male protection, without any guard. She's going to have a flock of sheep. So she's a lady, she has sheep. All of the wolves of the men are going to be interested in her. And the Prophet said, there will be so much security and safety. She will not even fear that she's going to be attacked. Maybe the wolf will attack her sheep. No human will touch her. And within 20 years, that prediction came true as well. Within 20 years, this prediction came true as well. In the Battle of the Khandaq, when once again we learn from the seerah, Allah tells us in the Quran that when the people gathered around you, وَتَظُنُّونَ بِاللَّهِ الظُّنُونَ, you began double guessing what's happening, how is this going to happen? إِذْ بَلَغَتِ الْقُلُوبُ الْحَنَاجِرِ, your hearts were stuck in your chests, Allah is saying. Even the Sahaba, they're like, what's going on? How are we going to get out of this? We are trapped, we're surrounded, 10,000 people, there is no hope. Our supplies are dwindling, we're running out of food. What's going to happen? And they're digging that trench. And they come across that massive boulder that they could not break. And so they called the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam, Ya Rasulullah, we cannot dig the trench anymore. There's a boulder here. And so the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam said, give me the axe. Give me the axe. He took the axe himself and he girded his loin to make it tight. You tighten your belt. And he jumped into the trench himself. And he said, Bismillah, Allahu Akbar. And he hit that rock, and that rock sparked a little bit. And he said, with this spark, Allah has shown me the palaces of the Caesar in Damascus, and they shall be yours one day. And then he raised the axe again. And once again, he said, Bismillah, Allahu Akbar. And once again, a spark comes out. And he said, with that spark, I am seeing right now the palaces of the kings of Yemen they used to live in, and they shall be yours one day. And the third spark, and he predicted once again Kisra and the palaces of Kisra, and he said, you shall distribute their treasures one day. What is going on when the Sahaba are at the lowest of the low, when they think there is no hope, when they think they're surrounded completely, and every single time the Prophet ﷺ cheers them up, lifts up their spirit, tells them, you have nothing to worry about. This religion will be taken care of. Allah Azza wa Jal will demonstrate the truth of this faith. Once again, in another incident, they came complaining to the Prophet ﷺ, Ya Rasulullah, for how long will this be happening? And he said to them, Inna Allah ta'ala zawali al-ard. Allah unfolded the earth for me. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala spread it out for me. فَرَأَيْتُ مَشَارِقَهَا وَمَغَارِبَهَا. And I saw the easternmost and the westernmost side. I saw the whole world laid out. And I am telling you, Allah has promised me that Islam will reach the easternmost as it will reach the westernmost. And wallahi, how true that is. The very people he said this hadith to, those same people were the ones marching all the way to Azerbaijan, lands they had never heard of. Those same people and their children were the ones marching all the way to Andalus. Their children were 100 miles outside of Paris. They are buried there to this day. 100 miles outside of Paris, we have the armies of the Umayyads buried over there. Who could have imagined this when they're surrounded by who they were surrounded by? And all of this demonstrates, O Muslims, we learn from the seerah over and over again that faith teaches us, Islam requires us, the Quran inspires us, the seerah proves to us that optimism is a part of our iman. We must be optimistic, not just because we believe in blind faith. These ahadith, we read them and we forget when they were told how crazy it must have sounded, how ludicrous for those who don't believe in Allah. They would have made fun. Even Suraqa was shocked. Yeah, what, me? I'm going to wear the bangles of Kisra? How is that possible? He couldn't believe because he didn't have iman. But we have iman. And all we need to do, not only believe in the Quran and Sunnah, look at the last 14.5 centuries of our ummah. I gave a khutbah last month. I don't want to go over all of that again. Go listen to it. The rise and fall and rise of the ummah. I gave a whole khutbah in which I summarized 14.5 centuries of our ummah. One tragedy and success, one fall and rise, continuously over and over and over and over again. Never has the ummah fallen down except that Allah lifted it up. Never has there been a defeat except that victory came from places and sources no one could ever have expected. This is not the worst time we have seen in our history, O Muslims. You want to know one of the worst times? Wallahi, things that happen that are exponentially worse, even in terms of numbers, even in terms of humiliation, than what we are seeing now. Look at the invasion of the Mongols. Do you understand? Genghis Khan and his son and grandson Hulagu Khan. Do you understand the havoc that they caused? The destruction, the pillaging, the plundering. 1 million people just in Baghdad. Just in Baghdad alone, one of the largest massacres pre-modernity was Hulagu Khan. Mountains and mountains of skulls. Do you understand? Literally mountains. Imagine this room of skulls of human beings. City after city after city. The complete Samarkand dynasty destroyed. The Abbasids brought to an end. The Khilafah did not exist after the Abbasids fell. It took a few decades for the remnants of a Khilafah to come forth, and another century before the Uthmaniyun came and took it. Do you think what we are seeing is new? Colonization. This is the era of my grandfather and your grandfathers, 1-2 generations ago. Colonization. When the French and then the British and then the Italians and then even the Dutch came and went to Indonesia. Every superpower came in and literally grabbed whatever they could. One dynasty after another, one land after another. It's not too long ago when 90% of the ummah was directly controlled by foreign superpowers. Directly. Now we can say at least indirectly, we know it, but at least there's a semblance of freedom, right? But directly controlled by superpowers. 90% of the ummah. You think this is the first time we're seeing this? Algeria, 132 years ruled by the French. More than 750,000 Algerians lost their lives. Multiple concentration camps, multiple jihads, multiple attempts to overthrow the British, the French, 4 generations, no, 5 generations of Algerians. And when were they freed? 1962. Some of you were alive back then. 1962 was finally they came to their independence. O Muslims, do not be disheartened. Do not lose hope. Victory is guaranteed every single time. And when victory comes, it typically comes from sources least expected. And when victory comes, there's always a revival and a renewal. There's always a resurgence that was totally unprecedented. And one of the things that we are seeing now, in spite of the physical tragedy, in spite of the loss of blood, in spite of the tragedy of lives, and wallahi, there's no justification, so don't misunderstand me. What we are seeing is that those lives that are being lost, Allah is using them to inspire millions of people to rediscover their lives. Allah Azza wa Jal has chosen the people of Gaza. Allah has blessed them and tested them. And Allah has used them to revive the iman in the hearts of billions of people. Never in our lifetimes have we seen this level of resurgence. Yes, wallahi, the superpowers have failed, but the ummah is well and alive. The love of Palestine, the unity that we are facing, the resurgence and revival across the globe, this is unprecedented. And that is real victory. Superpowers come and go. Dynasties come and go. Nations come and go. It is raw iman. It is faith. It is courage. It is bravery that leaves actual legacies. And when it comes to that reality, then insha'Allah ta'ala, the future is very, very bright. We are seeing this around the globe. We're seeing this even amongst non-Muslims who are embracing Islam. So many people are being inspired by the courage and bravery of the people of Gaza. And that is where the real victory lies. So, O Muslims, my message to you is very simple and very clear. It's exactly what Allah says. فَلَا تَهِنُوا وَلَا تَحْزَنُوا وَأَنْتُمُ الْأَعْلَوْنَ إِن كُنْتُم مُؤْمِنِينَ. Allah does not speak except the truth. And there is no one who speaks more truthfully than Allah. And the Quran tells us truthfully, do not give up and do not become anxious. You shall be victorious if only you have iman. وَلَا تَهِنُوا وَلَا تَحْزَنُوا وَأَنْتُمُ الْأَعْلَوْنَ إِن كُنْتُم مُؤْمِنِينَ. This was true when the Prophet ﷺ passed away and the Sahaba panicked, what's going to happen? The empire almost collapsed and Abu Bakr radiallahu anhu came and unified it. This was true when the Umayyads and Abbasis had a civil war and Allah saved the Ummah. This was true when the Mongols invaded and Allah brought out the Mamluks to save that empire. This was true when the Crusaders invaded and Allah Azza wa Jal brought about Salah ad-Din al-Ayyubi. This was true when city after city was conquered and Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala then blessed Sulaiman al-Fatih to conquer Constantinople, which was the queen of all cities of the world, which was the seat of the Roman Empire, and Allah gave that to us and it is now Istanbul. This was true when colonization came, when Napoleon invaded Egypt, when the British invaded India, when the Italians invaded into Libya, when the Dutch invaded into Indonesia, and in every single time the Muslims were weak in the beginning, and perhaps militarily they're still weak, but those invasions, they provoked iman. Those invasions brought about scholars. Those invasions brought about a revival of the ummah. And regardless of the political realities, in every one of those lands, Islam is strong, iman is fresh, courage is at all-time high, and the ummah is alive and strong and breathing, and that is the real victory. So, O Muslims, do not lose hope, do not falter, do not give up. You shall be victorious if only you turn to Allah and live up to that level of iman. Let us make dua to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala for ourselves and our brothers and sisters in Gaza. يا حي يا قيوم يا ذا الجلال والإكرام يا سميع الدعاء يا من بيده ملكوت كل شيء وهو يجير ولا يجار عليه يا سميع الدعاء ربنا ورب السماوات السبع ورب العرش العظيم يا رب جبرائيل ورب ميكائيل ورب إسرافيل منزل السحاب يا رحمن يا رحيم. We ask you, O Allah, to bless the people of Gaza, to make their iman strong, Ya Allah. Give them the comfort of iman, Ya Allah. Allow them to feel the sweetness of their faith, Ya Allah. Ya Allah, in this time of darkness, make their iman a source of light for them. Ya Allah, in this type of despair, allow their iman to give them courage, Ya Allah. Ya Allah, substitute for their pain every single reward, Ya Allah. Ya Allah, exchange for their hunger, give them food, Ya Allah. Ya Allah, substitute their thirst and give them drink, Ya Allah. Ya Rahmanu, Ya Rahim, Ya Arhamar Rahimin. Ya Allah, show us the compassion and mercy that you have upon the people of Gaza, Ya Allah. Ya Qawiyu, Ya Aziz, send your aid upon the people of Gaza, Ya Allah. Ya Jabbaru, Ya Mutakabbir, take into account those that are doing dhulm, Ya Allah, and show us your power, Ya Allah. Show us your qudra, Ya Allah, from those that are doing dhulm. Ya Allah, utilize us to do khidmah to this deen and the people of Gaza, Ya Allah. Make our own tasks easier for us, Ya Allah. Allow us to facilitate that change, Ya Allah. Allow us to see victory swiftly and quickly, Ya Allah. Allah. Ya Allah, free the people of Gaza from the yoke of tyranny, from the evil of oppression, Ya Allah. Allow them to live dignified lives, Ya Allah. Ya Allah, we beg you to free Masjid al-Aqsa from the occupation of the apartheid regime, Ya Allah. Ya Allah, allow us to see a free Masjid al-Aqsa, Ya Allah. Ya Allah, allow us to pray, all of the Muslims to pray in Masjid al-Aqsa and return it to its glory, Ya Allah. Ya Allah, as you sent Salah ad-Din the first time around, choose another Salah ad-Din, send him to free al-Aqsa, Ya Allah, and allow us to see that victory in our own lifetimes. Ya Allah, you are the Rahman, you are the Rahim, you are the Qawi, you are the Sami' ad-Du'a. Ya Allah, to you we complain of our weakness, Ya Allah. La hawla wa la quwwata illa bik. Ya Allah, we have no power on this earth other than you. Ya Allah, there is no one we can turn to other than you. Ya Allah, we turn to you. We raise our hands to you, Ya Allah. Ya Allah, show us your mercy, Ya Allah. Guide us to that which will benefit us and the Muslims of Gaza, Ya Allah. Utilize us in the best manner, Ya Allah. Make us instruments of good, Ya Allah. Make us instruments of peace, Ya Allah. Make us instruments of khair, Ya Allah. And allow us to see every single nook and cranny of the Muslim Ummah in peace, in prosperity. Oh Allah, as we make dua for you for the people of Gaza, oh Allah, help the Muslims around the world. Help our Uyghur brothers and sisters, oh Allah. Help the Muslims of the Sudan, oh Allah. Help the Muslims of Kashmir, Ya Allah. Help the Muslims of Burma, Ya Allah. Help the Muslims of West Africa, Ya Allah. Help the Muslims of India against the BJP regime, Ya Allah. Wherever the kalima is said, any single Muslim in the world, Ya Allah, help and aid them and allow us to be one united ummah against those who oppose you. Ya Allah, resurrect us with our Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam and make our scales heavy and cause us to be in his companionship. Ya Allah, allow us to drink from the Hawd and the Kawthar on the day of judgment and cause us to enter Jannah بغير حساب ولا عذاب. Ya Rahmanu, Ya Rahim, allow us to be in the companionship of the Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam and the righteous companions and the khulafa and the shuhada, and what a noble companionship they are. Wa sallallahu wa sallam wa barak ala bi Muhammadin wa ala alihi wa sahbihi ajma'in wa jazakumullahu khairan. Wassalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuhu.
Assalamu alaikum. Jazakallah khair everyone for staying. Inshallah we'll pray Maghrib right now. So everyone just, we can move to the